Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have Melanie Ross, who's a training product specialist for A&AB, on with us today. The webinar is going to be on competency and training, focusing on methods, actions, and requirements. And really, the goal of this webinar today is to get a better understanding of the standard requirements for personnel competence, determination, and evaluation. We're going to learn an overview of the methods for determining necessary competence, discuss examples of actions organizations can take to ensure necessary competence and evaluate effectiveness of those actions taken, discuss common methods for documenting evidence of necessary competence, and then also review ways that technology can assist in competence evaluation and documentation. Now, before we get started, do you want to go through some housekeeping items with you today? Number one, this webinar is going to be recorded. So if you want to watch it again or share it with other team members who may have missed it, it will be available on the Qualtrics website. Plus, as you've registered, you also will get sent a link to the recording as well. Also, we have saved some time at the end of the webinar for questions. So as we go through the presentation today, if something pops in your mind, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar application. And at the end, we'll compile all of those questions together and answer as many of them as we possibly can within the time that is allowed. So my name is Karen Arriviaga, and I'm an account executive here at Qualtrics. We do have a mix of attendees on today, so I want to give you a quick overview of our company. We have some customers, we have some people thinking about Qualtrics, and some people who have never even heard of Qualtrics before. Qualtrics is a compliance software platform specifically designed to manage quality initiatives. Organizations usually will turn to Qualtrics when they're looking to reduce or eliminate the burden associated with manual or paper-based systems. And that comes down to the ability that our software has to automate those key processes. We've been around since 1993 when our parent company was pursuing ISO 9001. They were really looking for a way to streamline that process and ensure that no details were overlooked. And so they started from scratch and built the framework that would ultimately become Qualtrics. Not only did they crush their audit, but the assessors were impressed with the software and suggested that we should share it with others and start selling it. And so that's what we did. So today, more than 25 years later, we're a leader in the quality and compliance industry, but we're also happy to count several accrediting bodies among our customers, including today's presenter, A&AB. So without further ado, let me introduce Melanie Ross. Melanie is a training product specialist with A&AB. She has over 15 years of experience in quality assurance, quality control, and quality management. She has worked in a variety of industries, including chemical, biological, oil and gas, and aerospace, developing quality management systems, including internal audit programs, vendor qualification procedures, and implementation of Lean Six Sigma. Currently, Melanie is a training product specialist with A&AB, developing and delivering training on a variety of topics, including ISO IEC 17025 and risk-based thinking. So at this point, I will stop sharing, Melanie, if you want to take over the screen and show yours.
Yes, I will.
And I can hear you.
Great. I had to unmute first. All right. Well, thank you, Karen, for that introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to see so many people on the webinar today. We partner with Qualtrics to provide these webinars to further your understanding of specific management system requirements. As Karen said, we're going to talk today about competency and training, the methods, actions, and requirements of the different standards that we'll discuss. Recent changes in the ISO IEC 17000 series of accreditation standards has put a greater focus on competence and demonstration of competence of personnel. ISO 9001 also incorporated competence into the standard with the updates in 2015. Organizations with management systems either certified to ISO 9001 or accredited to ISO IEC 17025 or 17020 for inspection bodies are required to train their personnel. Ensuring personnel are competent to perform assigned tasks and responsibilities is important in ensuring the quality of work and validity of results. This webinar will review the standard requirements for personnel for all three standards, ISO 9001, 17025, and 17020, as well as some common mechanisms for conforming to the requirements. During the webinar, we're going to review the standard requirements for training and personnel competence determination and evaluation, as well as an overview of methods for determining necessary competence. We will review some examples of actions organizations can take to ensure necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken, along with some common methods for documenting evidence of necessary competence. We will round out the discussion with ways that technology can assist in competence evaluation and documentation. Before we begin, let's define what is competence. For this definition, we look to ISO 19011, Guidelines for Auditing Management Systems. This standard is applicable to all organizations that need to plan and conduct internal audits of management systems, including those management systems certified to ISO 9001 and/or accredited to ISO IEC 17025 or 17020. Simply put, competence is the demonstrated personal attributes of personnel and the demonstrated ability to apply knowledge and skills. Organizations need to ensure personnel are competent to perform the tasks and activities necessary to achieve intended results as a good business practice, but also as a requirement of their management system, if they are certified or accredited. Without competent personnel, organizations would fail to thrive. Regardless of the standard that manages your management system, all of the standards have requirements for competence of personnel. In ISO 9001:2015, competence requirements are in Clause 7.2. The standard states that organizations must determine the necessary competence of people doing work under its control that affect the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. Organizations must ensure that personnel are competent through appropriate education, training, or experience, take actions to acquire the necessary competence where applicable, evaluate the effectiveness of actions taken, and retain documented information as evidence of competence. When we look for competence requirements in ISO IEC 17025:2017 for test and calibration laboratories, we look at Clause 6.2. It states that all personnel are competent and the laboratory must document the competence requirements for each function influencing the results of laboratory activities. Similar to 9001, 17025 points to the requirements for education, qualification, training, technical knowledge, skills, and experience. The laboratory must ensure that personnel have the competence to perform laboratory activities for which they are responsible, as well as evaluate the significance of deviations. The laboratory must have a procedure and retain records for determining competence requirements, training of personnel, and monitoring of competence, among other things. The final standard requirements we will review are those for ISO IEC 17020:2012 for inspection bodies. The requirements for competence are contained in Clause 6.1 of this standard. The inspection body must define and document competence requirements for all personnel involved in inspection activities. Again, these include requirements for education, training, technical knowledge, skills, and experience. Personnel responsible for inspection must have the appropriate qualifications, training, experience, and satisfactory knowledge of the requirements of the inspections to be carried out. A documented procedure is required for induction, mentored working period, and continuing training, which depends upon the ability, qualifications, and experience of each inspector. As with the other two standards, the inspection body must maintain records of monitoring, education, training, technical knowledge, skills, experience, and authorization of personnel involved in inspection activities. So we can see from this explanation that competence of personnel is important for any management system. Oops, sorry about that. There are many ways organizations can determine the necessary competence of personnel. Oftentimes, it is simply through the written job description for the positions within the organization. Job descriptions document responsibilities, skills, knowledge, education, and authorities. One thing to consider here, though, is that job descriptions can sometimes be written with a broad brush to cover the full gambit of responsibilities of one type of position. If there are specific competencies for personnel that are more broadly defined in the job description, it may be worthwhile for the organization to document those competency requirements further. One way to do this is by defining the key activities of the organization. Are all key activities covered by the job descriptions? Are there sufficient competent personnel to perform those key activities? Are the organizational needs met with the competency of the personnel available? If new activities are planned, such as the introduction of a new product line, new test or calibration, or new technology, are there competent personnel available to perform those new activities? For certified or accredited organizations, using the scope of certification and/or accreditation can aid in determining if sufficient competent personnel are available or if additional training is required to ensure personnel are competent to perform all of the activities related to the organization's needs and requirements. When we look at examples of actions organizations can take to ensure necessary competence, we see that there are a wide variety of options. The most common is on-the-job training, where a more senior employee with the necessary competence mentors a newer employee. Internal training can take many forms. It can be a coordinated classroom-type training, or simply reading and understanding a procedure. Individuals within the organization develop, plan, and execute the training for internal personnel. External training is provided by professional organizations or contractors that possess the skills and knowledge to pass on competence to trainees. Typically, external training ends with a certificate that documents the competence of the individual who completed the training. Conferences are a great way for personnel to develop their competence. Conferences often have short courses, technical talks, or tutorials that can further the competence of personnel. Of course, formal education in the form of a degree or technical program is another way to ensure necessary competence as well. And finally, online courses. There has been a steady increase in the availability of online courses to further personnel competence in many areas, including standard requirements, risk-based thinking, and cause analysis and corrective action. These are just a few of the ways that organizations can evaluate the effectiveness of actions taken. The most common, especially for external training, is a comprehension test or exam. Participants complete the exam to demonstrate they understand the information provided during the training. A certificate of participation or completion can also be used as demonstration of competence. The certificate attests that the individual attended the training, participated in the activities, and is deemed competent in the related areas. This is similar to sign-off by the trainer. Sign-off by the trainer is often performed after demonstration and observation by the trainee. The trainer is attesting to the abilities of the trainee to perform the tasks and activities related to the training. One way that laboratories can evaluate the effectiveness of actions taken is by personnel participation in formal proficiency testing programs. These programs provide samples for individuals to test or calibrate to demonstrate that they are competent to perform the test or calibration. And finally, reviewing records generated by personnel can also evaluate the effectiveness of actions taken. Are the records accurate, complete, and traceable? If so, the individual completing those records may be deemed competent. Now let's talk about documenting evidence of necessary competence. An obvious example is the good old training record, be it electronic or hard copy. Other records can include proficiency testing results for laboratories, manufacturing records and test, calibration, or inspection records. Certificates of completion and diplomas also document evidence of necessary competence. Again, the records maintained depend on the organization and the competence requirements that are being demonstrated. Some organizations use a variety of documentation as evidence of necessary competence. That's okay. The key takeaway here is to ensure the evidence is readily available for audits or assessments, and that it accurately reflects the competence of personnel involved in the certified or accredited activities. Having competence records readily available will facilitate your audit or assessment and provide confidence in the competence of personnel involved in key activities. Organizations can leverage technology to facilitate competence evaluation and documentation. Some organizations use Excel matrices to document competence for specific positions and then document the competence of each personnel within those positions. Other organizations may have a LIMS, Laboratory Information Management System, or ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning Program, to maintain competence requirements and documentation. Another way to document competence evaluations and documentation is through a document management system such as Qualtrics. Qualtrics has a variety of ways to document competence requirements, from linking standards to documents, to providing quizzes or tests related to documents, and to workflows, all of which can be tied to individual personnel for a comprehensive online training program. Now that we've gone over the requirements of the standards and different ways to document competence, I'll now turn it back over to Karen to demonstrate further how Qualtrics can assist in competency and training.
Great. Thank you, Melanie, so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, let me share my screen and let me know if you can see it. Can you guys see my screen?
I see my picture, so I can
Wonderful. See it. I see your picture. All right. Well, thank you, Melanie, so very much for that part of the presentation. You know, when you listen to Melanie's presentation, she expresses the importance of so many elements of tracking competency, but it's specifically about documenting your employees' training records, because this is how you prove employee training is complete and effective to meet those requirements of the standard you're either certifying or accrediting to. You know, it is also what your auditor is going to look for when they start coming in to visit you and looking into those records. You know, having all these records in one place will really save an organization significant time, you know, before and during their audit. And this is really like Melanie mentioned, where Qualtrics comes in. Our training management portion of our product has specifically been designed to provide an efficient way to track employee training efforts while forcing them to prove competency to the trainings and their job responsibilities. So what I'm going to do, we are going to look at a Qualtrics instance. So if I jump into Qualtrics, the area that we're going to focus on today is over here to the right, where you'll see that this person, in this case it's Trevor, who's a quality manager at this organization, has a number of tests and trainings they need to complete within Qualtrics. Now, any employee that is in Qualtrics is going to be notified through emails and inbox notifications when they have a training or test to complete. These notifications will also escalate if those actions aren't taken, really truly holding employees accountable to their own training and competency records. One of the easiest ways to track competency and to automate that in Qualtrics is through acknowledgement tests. And I'm sure everybody here has been in that scenario where you have standard operating procedures or documents that now that they've been published, they just need to be sent to everybody in the organization, and they need to read that most published version of that document. That's where these acknowledgement tests come in. So if I click this one around personnel qualifications, it's going to take me to a very simple test where I will open up this document. I would then read this document and the procedure to make sure that I'm familiar with it. And then if I come back into Qualtrics, it's something as simple as, please acknowledge that you've read the latest published revision of this document, which is attached. Click yes and hit submit. The nice thing about these tests is that they can automatically be linked to any type of document that you have in our system. One of the other features of Qualtrics is really handling the versioning control of your documents. When those documents are published, these tests will automatically get sent out by our system to a group of predefined people, letting them know they now need to read the most published version of that document. Hit submit, so now the quality team has a record that they have done that action. Now, usually the next question I get when we start talking about this is, well, how do you make sure somebody truly read the document? How do you make sure that they really can prove competency to those changes? Well, you have the power to change this from just a simple yes answer to multiple choice, true, false questions, really tracking competency. Because if they can't answer the questions that you're asking them to, then they probably didn't really read and understand the document. So it's a great way to really test that. If I pop back over to my inbox, very simple how you do those acknowledgement tests. Qualtrics can also handle the more in-depth trainings. So when Melanie mentioned the on-the-job trainings or internal and external trainings, or even the job-specific competency type trainings that you would need to track for ISO, these can also be managed in our system. We have a number of different users that use this portion of our product in many different ways, some of which are on the webinar today. And so we see anything from onboarding trainings to safety and OSHA, on top of some of those job-specific trainings, some of which are trainings that are done on a recurring basis. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of the trainings that you can administer in Qualtrics. So we're going to just look at a quick example here for bloodborne pathogen training. So I'm going to click this. When I go into that training, the first thing that you'll see is just a description of the training. So when you're setting up different trainings in Qualtrics, you get to say exactly what you want that individual to do. So in this case, I need you to complete your annual bloodborne pathogen training. Because this is an annual training, what that means is that this person needs to complete this once a year. So that's set up in our system to automatically send this every single time that date comes around. For this training, we've pointed them to specific resources. So in this case, they need to read a document that's in our document tree, and they need to watch a YouTube video. But these resources and this description can really say anything. So it can say, I need you to go learn how to drive a forklift, and I need you to do that off-site at this location, and then bring back your certificate of completion. It can also say, like kind of Melanie outlined, I need you to go visit this senior chemist and learn how to specifically do this type of testing on this piece of equipment. At that point, you might even give them some documentation that they need to fill out to show competency to be able to do that testing, all of which can be attached to these records. Once that's been complete, the person would just come in, choose the date that that training was complete, add any certificates of completion or documentation. At the end of the day, this is just a record that helps prove competency for your organization. They can add comments and then hit training is complete. The way that Qualtrics is built, it even gives you the option to set up different tests to track competency. So in this case, it's prompting me to take a test on bloodborne pathogens. So you can see that this is multiple choice, true, false questions, really tracking if I actually participated and read and understood what was being presented to me in that video. Really what Qualtrics is doing with these trainings is replacing the need to bring everybody in your organization into one room, go through a big PowerPoint, and then test them on that information, grade the tests. We're automating that process to streamline it. Now, if you're using Qualtrics or software to do that, people can take their trainings in their own time and can get it done when it is right for their schedules. So you can see in this example of this test, I need to get 100% passing grade. And these are all the different test questions I have to answer. So I have the questions here. So we'll go ahead and fill out these answers. Make sure that I'm getting these right. Some of you probably know this off the top of your heads. This is false. This is... And at this point, I would hit submit. The nice thing about Qualtrics tests as well is that you have the choice to be as simple or as complex as you want to. If you wanted, we actually have a way of having a pool of questions that randomly rotate so you make sure that people aren't cheating off of each other. There's lots of little intricacies that you can do with our software to make sure that you're tracking competency to the right people. Once you submit this, at this point, I did not receive a passing score. And so I would be able to retake the test if I needed to. Because I didn't receive a passing score, this automatically was sent to my manager, and they've now been notified that that score did not pass. If I go back to my inbox, I will actually see that I have the test right here as well, still in my inbox. This test will not leave my inbox until I go ahead and complete it and show competency to this test. So let's try this again. And and if I fail it again, I did. I must have a number written down incorrectly. The next step, if I were able to pass this, the other things that we have as an option in Qualtrics is the ability to do competency sign-offs. And so Melanie mentioned the ability or the need to have different managers or different people within the organization to sign off on effectiveness review and observations. Something that is built into Qualtrics is that step. So if you pass a test and it automatically gets sent to an individual, or if you pass a test, a notification will get sent to your manager where they will be notified to go in and potentially come to where you're working, observe you, make sure that what your training was effective, and then they can come back within Qualtrics and sign off on your training records. That is a step within Qualtrics that you can do as well. Now, another important thing about Qualtrics is the reporting aspect of our system. So if I go to our reports, with Qualtrics, you get a number of system reports that you can run. So here's just a couple of examples. The ones that we're going to focus on today are the training results and the training matrix. So if I hit training results and come here, what I can do here is actually pull up the test that I was taking. I want to look at the test from all users, and I want to see how people are answering these questions. What questions are they getting wrong? What questions are they getting right? Who is failing this? Who is passing it? And the reason why you want to be able to look into this information is to be able to identify trends. So if I come down here and see that Ian has failed this, and I can open up his record and see these are the questions that he answered, and this is what he got correct and what got wrong. And if I go up here and look at Eric's failed attempt, I can also see what he got wrong and what he got right. This is a case where you can start looking, if people are answering the same questions, they're getting the same things wrong, maybe the test and the training isn't really hitting on those answers hard enough, and are there ways to improve the way that I'm training on these specific resources to make sure that my audience is truly understanding what they need to in terms of competency. The other report I'm going to run is our training matrix. And this is a very popular report with Qualtrics and our users because it allows organizations and quality team members to pull a list of all the training records that their users are familiar with and are taken, and be able to see what has been finished, what has been completed, what has not been completed. So if I come here, I can see a list of all the people I have in my organization, all the trainings they've been assigned. You'll notice that some trainings might not be associated with some individuals. Well, they might not be performing the tasks or doing the job responsibilities that they need to. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Eric. We're going to pick on Eric today. And when I click his name, it pops up his personnel file. The personnel file is giving the organization a description of who Eric is. His first name, last name, position, email, and so on. This also can be an area where you add information like their diploma or their training records or their job qualifications and such. All of this is configurable to be able to put that information in there to show that you're tracking competency. It also allows you to see this information down here. So which is his full training record. So he can have an idea of how many trainings he's have taken and which ones were optional and which ones were required. So if he goes into the one that he took for bloodborne pathogens, I'm going to select this one. He would be able to see, and anybody else checking out his training records, he would be able to see that full audit trail in terms of when he took that test, or when he took the training, when he finished and completed the test, the completion verification, who actually signed off that that training was effective. In this case, it was Trevor. The description of the training, what documents and videos he was trained on, and of course, his testing results as well. So if you come down here, you can see that in this case, he also failed the bloodborne pathogen test once, and then he passed it on the second time. But because Qualtrics is tracking that full audit trail and really everything that our system does, you will have those records readily available to you. And when your auditor comes in, it'll allow them to see it as well. All right. The other thing I want to mention is with Qualtrics, our system is constantly evolving. That's one of the things when you're a Qualtrics customer, you get all of our new functionality that we build per year as part of your subscription to our product. One of the newest functionality items that we're starting to see in our system is the ability to have dashboarding. So if you're a quality manager or a director and you really want to get a sense of outstanding trainings or tests employees need to complete, this is a great way to get visibility into that data. You can view it on a company-wide level. So in this case, these are all the tests and trainings that need to be taken still within the company, or you have the ability to see it on your own personal level as well. So lots of exciting things coming out of our team in terms of dashboarding and having this visibility. And so we're excited to share that with you today. Now, testing and training is only one aspect of Qualtrics. Because Qualtrics is an all-in-one solution, customers have access to all Qualtrics functionality in one system. So this does include our document management and version tracking functions, the ability to report, and the ability to use our workflows. And if you've ever been on one of our webinars, which you know we do a lot of these educational ones, you probably have heard us talk about the power of process automation. Workflows are ways to automate processes, where each step is going to be defined with customizable fields and routed with automatic email alerts, and notifications are sent, keeping tasks on time and holding employees accountable. Melanie actually mentioned one specifically for some of our 17025 and 020 people out there around proficiency testing as a way to prove competency. This actually happens to be one of the pre-built best-in-class workflows that we have in Qualtrics to really help manage that process. So if I pop back over to Qualtrics, I'm going to click our workflow section. And when I open this tab, you'll notice that there's a lot of different workflow options here. Some of these are our best-in-class workflows, which means that they come predefined and pre-created in your system when you purchase Qualtrics. One of those is proficiency test monitoring. So if we click this, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom and show you the diagram. What we do with these workflows is we take a process, usually ones that are specifically outlined in ISO. However, you can do other processes as well and within our system. And we take that process, break it up into different steps, kind of representing the different individuals and groups that would interact with those steps, and then automate the process throughout those different steps. So in this case, step one, proficiency provider and analysis information. So if I go up here to the top, the first step in this case would be choosing who is even going to be the employee who does this proficiency test. I'm going to choose Trevor just because in this demo instance, it'll stay with me throughout the different steps. What section of the organization, the information about the proficiency test. So in this case, I would choose a specific test, tell the year, the test name, the test number, and so on. Keep in mind, Qualtrics workflows are very configurable. So if you're looking at this and you're like, well, I'm not under any of those types of proficiency tests, or we don't run those in our organization, that's fine. We'll actually teach you how to configure these to best fit what your organization needs. You would type in who your section manager is, who the technical leader is, when the due date for the person to actually do the proficiency test, and when it needs to be submit to QA. So we'll just go ahead and say we want that by the 13th. At this point, you'll notice in my diagram to submit to the actual analyst doing the proficiency test. So in this case will be Trevor. So if I click this, if I wasn't Trevor, the person would automatically get an email notification and an inbox notification. But in this case, because it's Trevor, it just pops up on my screen, and I would choose the methods that I'm using. I would actually bring in the supporting documentation or the results I have from that proficiency test. The provider's data sheets I would also bring in here, so I could actually just go and pull a quick file, add it here, hit upload, and now that file is now a part of this record. And if I come down here, I would just simply hit submit to QA. Now you can kind of get an idea, and we won't go through the whole webinar because we do want to get to the questions section of the webinar. Once it gets to QA, that person will review that information and determine if it's complete. And through that assessment that the quality manager is doing and the proficiency provider is doing, if inconsistencies are found, you might find that at that point a corrective action may be needed. One of the great things about our system is that we do have the ability to launch workflows from within workflows. So this is the perfect example of that, where an inconsistency was found, so that therefore a corrective action needs to be started. You would just hit launch corrective action from this workflow, and it's going to take the information that was gathered through some of these other steps and automatically copy and paste it into a new corrective action workflow. And when it does that, now when you run all of your corrective action reports to see where your corrective actions are coming from, that information will automatically be in that report. So when you go through management review and your internal auditing, you'll be able to see that information readily available to you. Now, we talk a lot about reporting because at the end of the day, the reporting is what gives you the visibility into Qualtrics and into your quality management system to determine, how opportunities for improvements and help you identify risks. Another way to do quick reporting in Qualtrics is through our advanced search. So I can actually click proficiency testing, and do a quick search and see every proficiency test instance that I have in this current demo system. And so I can see there's one here that's closed. It was done by Pat. If I click this ID, it's going to take me to that proficiency test record. So at any point, if your auditor is on site or needs the records that show what was done, how it was done, and what that information is, you can quickly pull up one of these records and show them. You've got the full audit trail of who did what at what point that's automatically being tracked by our system, who was in charge of the proficiency testing, what section, the section manager, the information about the test, and so on. All of that information is automatically going to get tracked by our system, and that's how you're going to be able to report and do more within it. Now, this is a very high-level overview of Qualtrics, and so if I go back to my inbox, if you ever want to get an idea of some of the other functionality the system has to offer or more information about the best in class, please let us know. We're happy to have conversations with you or even take you into a more detailed demonstration of the product. And at this point, I think we're ready for some questions. I see that there are some coming in. At any point, if you guys need to reach out to us, even after the question and answer session that we have today, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We're happy to help you. So Melanie, I'm going to invite you to come back on.
I'm here.
Wonderful. And actually, I have a quick question for you as we see other questions coming in.
Okay.
If people have questions about ANAB and kind of the services you offer, what's the best way for them to reach you?
You can go to anab.org. We have a lot of information about our programs along with all of the training that we offer. You can also email training@anab.org. Or you can contact me at mross@anab.org, and I can forward your questions to the appropriate people.
Wonderful. And any information about the trainings you offer that you would want to share about kind of the different types?
Yes, so we offer a variety of different trainings. We do private custom training. We also do public on-site training, and we also offer a lot of online training. I mentioned that during the presentation. The online training is nice because you don't have to travel, first of all. And second of all, you can take it at your own leisure. So you get access to the training for a few days. You can take it when you have the downtime during your work to be able to complete those trainings. And we offer it on a variety of different topics. We do a lot of overview courses of the different standards, as well as, again, the risk-based thinking, cause analysis and corrective action. We offer industry-specific training as well, such as AOAC for food laboratories.
Great. All right, and we have a lot of questions, and they're coming in from different angles. So we're going to try to get through as many as we possibly can. So thank you, everyone, for being so willing to ask questions. So the first one, and Melanie, I believe this is for you. Do you have any advice on the development of competencies whenever your SOPs are also new? Should it be viewed as a hand-in-hand scenario? New SOPs, new competency?
It really depends on the procedure and the risk involved to the organization. If it's a new test or a new inspection that's going to be performed, it's probably best to do that hand-in-hand walk through the procedure with the people that are going to do it. If it's something, I guess, more simple, like a new complaint process, you could just walk through the procedure without actually performing the tasks. Proficiency testing is a really good way to introduce new tests as well. But as an accreditation body, ANAB does not specifically say how you introduce those new methods and how you train your personnel. It's really, again, based on the risk to the organization and the complexity of the task being introduced.
Great. All right, now here's a question. about Qualtrics. In Qualtrics, are you able to track continuing education hours per person or across a unit or section? Great question. This is something that we can talk about a little bit further. We have seen some organizations do some very creative things within Qualtrics. From everywhere from being able to do things specifically in the actual testing and training, to adding additional fields within the personnel records, to even breaking out actual and creating specific training records within workflow section of the organization. I would definitely say let's have a conversation about specifically what you're looking to do in terms of continuing education hours. We have some organizations, we have the ability to do elective trainings in the system as well. So it's definitely a conversation. We'll probably reach out to you once this webinar is over and talk a little bit about some of those specifics. Great question, though. All right. So next question, do you have a process for tracking personnel licenses or certifications with varying expiration dates per person? And Paul, is that a question for me or is that a question for Melanie? If you want to type that in. For Qualtrics. Again, that kind of comes down to how you would like to do it. Like we've seen some organizations do different things. So this might be a scenario where you're actually creating different workflows to help manage that. You do have the ability to expire sort of trainings. You do have the ability to, like I showed that personnel file. You have the ability to create custom fields on that personnel file. So we have seen organizations link people's individual licenses and certifications to those personnel files as well. So definitely one of those questions that, yes, let's have a conversation about that to see, you know, what we've seen from some of our customers and how that would work for you. All right. Next question. Can each user sign off once complete using their username and password each time training or tests are complete? Yes, we do have the ability to, at each step of the process that's completed within Qualtrics, to add that extra step of your username and password. A lot of times we see this with some of our organizations that are under ISO 9001 or some of our organizations that need to have electronic signatures, whether they're under FDA or CFR Part 11. So we have that electronic signature that you can turn on in our system. So anytime somebody completes a training or a test, the system will force them to retype in their username and password to make sure that they are who they say they are. All right. Another question, the 100% score requirement, is that adjustable value? Suppose I need a scoring just to be 90% for competency. Can that be set? Yes. And William, if it was set in this demo, I would not have failed the bloodborne pathogen one, but absolutely, you can set that for 90%, 80%, any percentage that you want. That all comes down to the configurability of what you can do in the system. There's even the chance or the ability that if you do fail a test, you can show that person what questions they got wrong and which questions they got right. So depending on if you want to give that information to the person taking the test, you have that availability as well. Great question. All right, Melanie, this is for you. Is there guidance from accrediting bodies as to how in-depth the test should be for your specific industry or lab? Great question.
There is not specific guidance. Like I answered the other question, it's all about risk. I mean, we've heard the term risk incorporated into 9001 and 17025. You really need to look at what is it that you're trying to convey to the trainee, and what is it that you want them to understand once they have finished the training. And that's really what you need to target the test at. I'm developing a training right now where I'm writing the exam for that training, and I'm thinking, what are the objectives? What do they need to know once they've completed that training? And what do I need to demonstrate that they know and as part of the competence? And that exam is going to be that competence demonstration. So what is it that they need to answer and understand in order to demonstrate that they are competent to do that task?
Yeah, great question. Great answer. All right. Next one. Is there a demo software option for trying out Qualtrics? Yes. If you ever want to take Qualtrics for a test drive, please let us know. There's actually a free trial request form on our website. It doesn't automatically launch a free trial of Qualtrics, because I'll warn you, when we give free trials, we are giving you the whole system. So what we like to do is have a conversation with you, show you a demo, and actually walk you through some of the specific parts of the system that you would be evaluating, and kind of give you like a mini training on our system. Because we want to make sure that experience with that free trial is positive, and that you have kind of the information and background of how our system works, so you can really see what the system can do. But if you're interested in doing a free trial, please let us know, and we'd be happy to reach out to you and kind of walk you through the different steps of the process to get you one. Great question. Danielle asks, Karen, when you said anyone can see the training records, did you mean only those with training and testing permissions, or any Qualtrics user? I always thought the training records were limited to those to who can view. Danielle, thank you. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The permissions that you set in your system will determine who can see those training records. Now, if you want every personnel to have access to their own training records, you can set it up where every person would be able to access their own personnel file. They would go into Qualtrics, and when they click personnel file, they would just see their own personnel record. Or for those power users, those admins, the directors, the managers, anybody that needs to see multiple people's training records, you have specific permissions in the system to set where only they would see certain people's and groups training files. So absolutely, our system is, so thank you, Danielle, for asking that and asking for clarification. You're absolutely right. You have the complete capability of choosing who can see what in the system in terms of everyone's training records. Great question. Does Qualtrics have a statistical process control module for methods and tests? At this point in time, we do not. Patrick, I think that's a question that I would like to learn a little bit more about, exactly what you're looking for in terms of what type of end result you're looking for and what would be involved in that process. When I say we don't have it, what that means is that we won't have like a best-in-class workflow that's already predefined. What I will say is, with Qualtrics, though we have the best-in-class workflows that you get when you purchase the system, you also have the ability to build out your own processes within our system as well. So like, we have organizations that have been users for, oh my goodness, 5, 10 plus years, that literally have 80 workflows that they've built out in their Qualtrics instances, because they've taken it from just some of those core ISO workflows and processes and have really expanded into other areas of their organization. So this might be a good conversation, Patrick, for us to have outside of the webinar, to truly understand what you're looking to get and what your end results would want to be, so we can see if that's something that our software would be able to handle or not, even if it was something that you would build yourself with our system. And I will say, for anybody that is interested in seeing what that looks like, let us know. We do have a number of customers that are building their own, and one of the things that we hear the most from our customer base is that you don't have to have an IT degree or computer science degree to create workflows. You know, you do have to have an understanding of how your flow that you create is going to work, but it is something that we can train you on how to do. All right, can the workflow module be customized to specific industry recognized specifications? For example, I performed testing on UC-CAR 21. Can a workflow be set up to guide a technician through the different parts of the validation process for UC-CAR 21 to manage and track timing of the activity from the sample preparation to report generation and submission to the customer? There are definitely parts of that process that our system can help with. It comes down to, again, kind of like what I told Patrick, let's have a conversation of exactly the specifics of what you're looking to do. Because we have that capability of configuring, there's definitely parts of that process that we'll be able to do. We just want to make sure that we know of all the details to be able to tell you what our system can do and that what our system cannot do. But great questions. So you guys know we have some representatives on our team here that used to work for past customers of ours who are very proficient in our workflows. So for conversations like that, where we're really diving into specifics, we start bringing those groups of those individuals in to really identify what you're trying to do with the system. And a big part of who we are as a company is always to be honest and transparent. And we will tell you if it's possible, and we will tell you if there's just not something that we feel like would be right in our system. All right. Are there examples of training of manufacturing, assembly, and test methods that I can incorporate into Qualtrics? There aren't specific ones that we have. However, the majority of our customers, what they do when they're starting to bring Qualtrics in is really take some of those core processes that they already have developed for their organization and bring those in. Melanie, do you guys offer any training examples to or anything like that from ANAB?
For specific processes?
Yeah.
No, we keep
Yeah.
our training just specific to the standard and the standard requirements as well as accreditation requirements. If we dove into the specifics of different processes, then that would be more consulting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I would say there that I think for some of that, though we don't necessarily have it, I think the only thing that kind of pops into my mind is that we've got a lot of different users out there that use Qualtrics, and they're very interactive and very usually pretty willing to kind of share their experiences. And so reaching out to our community of users could always be a good way to kind of get ideas of how to use the system or different training examples as well. But great question. Wow, we've got a lot of questions coming in. This is great, guys. Can Qualtrics put ASTM ILCP results from ASTM reports? We would have to dig into that because I'm not sure if I truly understand what that is. That would be a question, Patrick, that I'm going to give you a call when we are done so I can understand exactly what you're asking, to see if we were to be able to do that, how it would happen, and kind of walk through what your options would be. So let me give you a call when this webinar is over and we can start having some of those conversations. Import, not import. Eliminate duplicate entries for results. Potentially. So import, not input. So what I will say to this extent is that we have API capability within Qualtrics. And so what that means is that Qualtrics has the ability to interact with other software platforms or other applications that are out there. As long as the other application also has an API of some sort that allows it to have a bridge between software platforms, there are ways that we have customers today pulling and pushing data into Qualtrics. So this can definitely be something that we can kind of discuss and go from there. What is the cost of Qualtrics? That's a great question. The cost of Qualtrics, we are a subscription price-based system. And so we have to look at how many users are going to use this system to really be able to give you an overall price. If you want to get an idea of what that is, please let us know. We're happy to have that conversation with you and just walk through what your options are. We have options on different users. We have different options, and it comes down to the trainings that you would go through with our system, different types of deployments. And so give us a call. We're happy to have those conversations with you, or feel free to email me. Is there a standard, oh, here we go again. Bill, yes. Is there a standard price for Qualtrics software? Is it dependent on the module or customer wishes to use or purchase? Is it a one-time purchase or required annual registration fee? So it's a subscription-based model. So there's going to be a recurring year-to-year price for Qualtrics. What that includes is not just the use of the software, but it also includes our hosting of the software, the maintenance. And when I showed you those dashboarding capabilities of the system, that is coming from development that we're doing recurringly. We're almost to the point where we're sending out new features about once a month, every 2 months here. All of that's included in that subscription. Also, the full support of the product is in that subscription as well. We look at just a general per user, but I think one of the biggest things that you point out here is asking, like, are you paying per module? No, Qualtrics does do it a little bit differently. We truly believe and understand, I think this comes down to us being ISO 9001 and us going through the process itself, that the different components of our system really help an organization meet the standards and meet the certifications and accreditation efforts that they're going through. And so what we've done is really made it all in one. You're not purchasing just document management. You're not purchasing just a car workflow or just our testing and training module. You get it all. You get all of our best in class, you get all of document management, all of our testing and training and our other features, and you determine how you roll that out to your organization. That way, if you get started with just, let's say, docs, test and training and a few of our best in class, if you come back to us later and they're like, all right, we are ready to bring in our management review workflow and our risk assessment workflow, there's no extra costs. You just would get that workflow in your system and be able to start pushing it out to your organization. Great questions. Whew. I'm going to take a drink real fast, guys. Hold on. I feel like I'm talking a lot. But this is wonderful. Keep them coming. And if I don't get to your questions, because I know that we've got about 6 minutes left, does Qualtrics have the ability to integrate with other systems? Yes, Lena, that kind of was when I was speaking about API. Yep, we do. So like we've seen organizations link us with ERP systems. We've seen organizations link us with LIMS systems as well. And so it just comes down to if the API is supported on both sides that and you have the IT resources to build the bridge between those. All right. Here's a question. So I'm registered with A2LA, so I was wondering if Qualtrics is something specific for A and AB accredited labs, or if it also was recognized by A2LA. And at the end of the day, and Melanie, do you want to chime into this one, or do you want me to answer this?
Well, I can chime in, and then you can add into that.
Okay.
As far as Qualtrics being recognized by a specific accreditation body, we really look at the standard requirements. You know, you're required to control your documents, you're required to do your risk assessments and your management review and your internal audits. And having a system like Qualtrics to manage that is great, but it's not something that we require as an accreditation body. The system is recognized. I mean, it is a document management system and a records repository that complies to the standard. It complies. If somebody else asked about T&I down in a few other questions below, you know, it complies to the requirements of the standards, whether you're 9001, you're 17025, you're 17020, you have T&I or your AOAC. The requirements of document management and the workflows and the records and all of that are within the Qualtrics system. So, you know, it's really up to the organization to decide which system they want to use and what fits their organization based on risk to the organization.
Great. Yeah, absolutely great points. And so we have organizations that, just to kind of give you a background of some of our customers, we have organizations that are under A&AB, A2LA, Perry Johnson, but then we have organizations that are 9001s that have different certification bodies, and there's different states requirements that some of our customers are on. So really lots of, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And like Melanie says, Qualtrics is a tool, but it's not a requirement for these organizations. All right. And I know we're not going to necessarily get to any of these. And Melanie, you've kind of looked through the list. Are there any more that you want to specifically answer?
Well, there was one right under that one that says one of the ways listed to demonstrate competency is records. And can I explain how records would be used to demonstrate competence? You know, in your organization, depending on what you're doing, you have manufacturing records, you have test records, you have inspection records that show the activities that were performed by the personnel involved in that activity, whether it's the inspection, the test, the calibration, or the manufacturing. And if you review those records from a quality perspective to say, were they filled out correctly? Is the traceability there? Did they follow the procedure? It's more of like an internal audit of your records to say, this person demonstrated competence in the records that you were reviewing. So when we look at clause 7.7 of 17025, the review of reported results is one of the quality control activities that laboratories can use. So this is one way for you to bolster the competence of your employees and the records of that competence by saying, as a manager or supervisor, I've reviewed these records and everything was filled out appropriately. It's not the only way to do it. You know, I mentioned in the presentation, there's a lot of different ways to maintain those records or to contain the records of competence. This would just be one that could enhance the competence demonstration of employees.
Great. All right, and let's do one more. And then everybody else, we will absolutely reach out to you and make sure that your questions are answered. I saw one here about, are you able to demo the link of ISO requirements to control documents? It's absolutely something our system can do. So when somebody mentioned TNI or ISO 9001, 17025, or 020, or really any type of requirements that you're under, we can bring those into Qualtrics. Monica, I can reach out to you and talk about how we can actually show you what that looks like. But in short, what we do is we bring those requirements into Qualtrics, and then you're aligning your documentation to those requirements that are in the system. And so then you can run gap analysis reports and be able to see how your documents align with those standards. You also have the ability to incorporate those standards with your corrective action requests in some of those records. So if you have a CAR that is submitted and it's actually pertains specifically to a part of the standard, you can link that standard so you can see if that continues to happen with that specific standard. There might be more attention pertaining to that specific area that needs to happen. So it's definitely something that we can do. Well, wow, everybody, thank you so very much for the interaction on this presentation today. I wish we could stay on and answer some more, but what we will do is absolutely reach out to you and make sure that we get all of your questions answered. And if you have questions about pricing or want to get some more, please let us know. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.